Hello, I'm Marcia Lombardo, outreach worker from the Medway Senior Center and host of this show, Good to Know. This program hopes to provide valuable information to our seniors and to all of our residents. The topic today will be debunking some of the myths of hospice care. Our guests today are Cindy Stewart, Tim Gould, and Casey Allman from Compassionate Care Hospice. I welcome all of you to the show.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thanks. Can we start just by talking about what hospice is and what the goals of hospice are?
Sure. Hospice is a type of care that provides aggressive care for the patient and the loved ones around remaining comfortable. When there is no cure or the family has decided that they don't want aggressive treatment such as diagnostics or going back and forth to the hospital or the emergency room, and the goal is to keep the patient comfortable and at home, wherever home is. We will come in. We have a team of nurses, social workers, chaplains, veteran liaisons, and hospice aides who would come into wherever the patient lives, whether it's at home, in a nursing home, an assisted living. We've even taken care of patients in hospitals, and provide the care so that we can make sure that they remain comfortable for the duration of their illness. Hospice doesn't speed anything up. It doesn't slow anything down. It just, during the disease process, the normal, natural disease process, we make sure that the patient is physically, spiritually, and psychologically comfortable, as well as supporting all of the family and friends.
And I think a lot of people associate hospice care with a cancer diagnosis. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. You know, the funny thing is that one of the largest, cancer certainly is a terminal diagnosis when the decision is made that there's no curative treatment or the family is suspending things that may not be providing a quality of life, and they really don't have a positive outcome. There are so many other diagnoses. I mean, for example, one of the biggest ones is Alzheimer's. People don't feel that Alzheimer's is a terminal diagnosis, but if you think about it, the patient will never get better. And the natural progression of Alzheimer's is, you know, they lose their ability to talk, to walk, to swallow, to eat. So it's a natural progression that the body really starts to slow down as the disease starts to take over. So hospice is for any patient who has a disease that there's no cure for, or that they're not going to rebound from. And you know, some people have something that we call malnutrition. They're not eating well and they just continue to slowly lose weight. I call them dwindlers. But again, what I say to families and to patients is that the body is this miracle machine. When it really starts to slow down and it can't process food and drink the way you and I can, then we would actually be causing more harm if we tried to force feed it or force fluids. And so what we really try to do, again, is just let the natural progression of the disease, whether it's old age, cancer, Alzheimer's, end-stage renal, end-stage pulmonary, whatever the disease is, we really just want to be there to help them through the journey and keep them comfortable and support the family.
Excellent. Very good. So you talked about that hospice care can be provided anywhere. So
Right.
if someone's in a nursing home, is that a different scenario than, say, that they're at home in terms of getting the services into them?
Right. This is a fairly new phenomenon. Medicare doesn't distinguish or discriminate wherever the patient is living. So if the patient calls a nursing home home, an assisted living home, or they live in their own private home, that's considered their home. And we're not allowed to distinguish between what home is home. If the patient clinically qualifies and the family wants to have access to comfort care, then it doesn't matter where they are. And we are required, and I think we are required to provide the service, but I also think that there are so many grateful families and patients who want it even if they're in a nursing home, because really what it is there's a second set of eyes and ears that are going in to provide the extra care. And simply because they're in a nursing home doesn't disqualify you from getting extra aid care. No matter where our patients live, they avail themselves to nurses who are experts in clinical care about hospice and end of life. They avail themselves of our medical director team, who are also experts in end of life care and symptom management. They get our chaplains, who, it's not really a religious type of thing, it's really about trying to help somebody find inner peace before they die. And inner peace could be found through nature, music, religion, or anything else that helps them find inner peace. And then we, of course, have the social workers. And the social workers are really there not to tattle on anybody. I think people get a little bit nervous about a social worker coming in. They're really about helping the family get their head around the fact that somebody that they love is not going to live forever. They also help when perhaps families are not on the same page. Sometimes there are people who want nature to run its course, and then there are other family members who want to keep sending them back and forth to the hospital regardless of what the patient wants to do. And so we kind of help families get on the same page about what is going to happen, and if the patient isn't going to rebound this time, providing that extra support. And then of course we have our own aides. We have specially trained aides who go in and are used to working with people who are at end of life. And no matter where the patient is, they get the 5 to 7 day a week aides. They get their 2 to 3 days a week nursing care, but it could be up to 7 days a week depending on what's going on. Their chaplains and social workers will be in, once a week, and then if things start to progress, you're going to see them more frequently as the family needs additional support.
And I think a lot of people think about hospice care as just kind of very much at the end of life, like in the last 48 hours that you're going to call in hospice, or 72 hours. At what point can hospice go in? What are the parameters for that?
That's a great thing to bring up. I think Cindy's one of our clinical liaisons, and her job is to help screen patients, so maybe she can talk about when somebody qualifies.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Usually we get phone calls sometimes from family members, and they question whether their loved one is ready for hospice services, and we'll go out and screen the patient. It doesn't really have to be a doctor that has recommended hospice. Any family member can actually ask for this, and so we would go out, screen them. Usually when we go out, we have a pretty good feel whether they qualify or not, but then we have to go back to the physician and get additional information and clinicals to prove to Medicare that yes, indeed, they do qualify.
Okay.
Sometimes we have a doctor's office that might call us and ask us to screen their patient. If the patient is in a nursing home, oftentimes the team that's in the nursing home sees that the patient is declining, maybe not able to do physical therapy or occupational therapy or speech anymore, and they will call us and ask us to do a screen. So, there's different qualifications for each diagnosis. For a patient that might be end-stage cardiac, they might be really short of breath, and the oxygen doesn't really help them. They may not even be on oxygen. They may be taking several trips back and forth to the hospital, and the hospital just keeps doing the same thing, giving them a little extra Lasix. And, we can come in there and manage their symptoms and keep them from going into the hospital.
I think some of the similar symptoms that we look for, that Cindy and the rest of the liaisons look for, is their weight loss. Have they multiple infections? Have they had multiple pneumonias or UTIs? Are they having skin breakdown? Are they not able to eat enough to sustain their weight? Are they having difficulty swallowing? Are they becoming more increasingly edematous, which means they're holding fluid? These are symptoms that we look for, and there's 1,000 symptoms, but these are pretty common symptoms that we look for. And I think one of the things that's the most curious to me is that many times families have a loved one who have a dementia or Alzheimer's diagnosis, and it's almost the easiest one to qualify, but their decline is so slow and so subtle over a long period of time that families a lot of times aren't quite sure, do they qualify or don't they?
Sure.
And so particularly with that diagnosis, you're looking at, are they not able to eat well? Are they choking? A lot of times they can't swallow. The fluid or food may go into their lungs. We call that an aspiration pneumonia. They might do that several times. They're not able to walk anymore. They're too weak. They can't ambulate. We're looking at they've lost their ability to speak well or recognize family members. So, again, the Alzheimer's is one of those things that's it's a pretty easy way to qualify them, but I think families are a little bit afraid, and you talked a little bit about it. They think if they bring hospice in, they're going to die in the next 2 days.
Sure.
I mean, we have people who, to be sure, who pass within a few hours. We get them so late. But then we have people who have this slow, steady, albeit continuing decline. We've had people on for 2 years. As long as we can, continue to show that there is a decline, and the medical directors, our physicians, review and say, yes, the patient could conceivably, if the disease runs its natural course, pass within 6 months. But
Marcia, also, I know that they've actually done studies for hospice, and they found that people that actually come on hospice sooner, believe it or not, live longer. And it's because their symptoms are being managed and their quality of life is enhanced and their family's more comfortable. And so I think people are really shocked at that, but they have done studies and to show that.
Very good. And does the family and the patient decide on the care plan? Is that something you sit down and discuss with the patient and the family in terms of how many people will be coming in, what kind of services are coming in, and help them decide the care plan?
Absolutely. And the nice thing about this particular benefit from Medicare and the other insurance is a couple of things that are really important. Number one is there's no copay. Okay. This is the only Medicare benefit that pays 100% for the team that comes in, the nurses, chaplains, social workers, aides, and the veteran liaisons, and our volunteers. It pays 100% for any DME equipment that we use. There's no copays. And this is a really big thing for many families because under the Medicare guidelines, you have to have doctor's orders for beds and oxygen and things like that, but under a hospice benefit, we can just order that without a doctor's order, a specific order, because we work under these orders. These are things that we think the patient needs, and Medicare gives us the flexibility to do it without getting specific orders like that, even though it's in our standing orders. It's kind of a technical term, but we can access that. It pays 100% for any medications that we order to keep the patient comfortable or manages their symptoms. And again, this is an area where most patients are paying co-pays, and it really can start adding up over the years. So meeting with the family, we talk about what are the goals of care. Is it to keep the patient comfortable and not go back and forth to the hospital? For patients who still are alert and oriented, a lot of times they don't want as many services, and they say, well, I don't want the nurse coming twice a day. I don't want an aide coming 5 times a week. Twice a week, sorry, for the nurse. But the flexibility of this benefit is very different than anybody else's. If the patient only wants to see a nurse every 14 days because they're doing well, but they just want that the backup if there's an emergency, that's helpful. And so the family and the patient can decide how frequently they want the team members to come in, but a nurse has to come in every 14 days just to keep the benefit. And sometimes that's a really good way to get started, because as the patient declines, we can just continue to add some more services. And I think it allows the patient and the family to maintain control, which is the most important thing here. Many times families and patients don't feel like they have control over anything anymore, but this is certainly something that they're the ones that are driving the plan of care.
It truly is their journey, and we really trying very hard to treat them with dignity and respect.
Sure. Is there follow-up to the family after the patient has passed, and is there support for the family from hospice?
Right. We have a bereavement program, and when we go out as a clinical liaison and meet with the family, sometimes our meeting is about 2 hours because we truly try and explain everything, but then get a little bit of a history of who this patient is. And then we talk to the healthcare proxy and the loved one that's contemplating hospice about our bereavement services. So we will follow them for 13 months. Our bereavement coordinator reaches out to them and checks in and sees how they're doing. Some families are fine. Some people really, really struggle. So we can recommend support groups. But then it's that every 3 months or so that they are sent literature on grieving, which, family, we all grieve. It doesn't matter. And I think that's really helpful. And our bereavement coordinator has even actually gone out to families' homes prior if we feel it's a very high bereavement risk, and she will meet with the families just to anticipate what's coming. So, everything is not cookie cutter.
Right.
It's really uniquely tailored for each family.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think that's an important point, because as I've always said that, you can't cookie cutter somebody's end of life journey. You have a different life experience than I do, and Tim and Cindy, we all are going to come into our end of life journey differently. And so what my needs are will be different than yours and Tim's and Cindy, and one of the things that Cindy touched on is that we really try hard to make sure that we individualize each person's end-of-life journey. And who did they love? Who did they lose? What were their hobbies? Where did they like to travel? What kind of music did they like? You know, simply because somebody isn't well doesn't mean they're not going to enjoy the same activities they did when they were well.
Right.
And music is such a phenomenal gift that we can give folks. There's so much science behind the art of music that, you know, for Cindy and the rest of her team, we find out what kind of music do they like. So the team members and the nurses and the chaplains and the social workers and the aides, they all kind of bring in the music. I mean, and now it's so easy because you just throw it on your phone, right? And we can say to families, maybe if it's just for that 45 minutes, if they loved Italian opera or they loved Sousa marches, whatever it was that they liked, you know, sometimes you can get that glint of recognition in somebody's eye. And we can say to them, look, you know, we were playing the music and your dad picked up their head and you could see he started tapping his toe, that for that 45 minutes we were able to get to them. That's the person that you knew and that you loved. And I know the person that may be here is not that person, but we were able to connect with him on that level for 45 minutes, and that is such a gift to the families.
Absolutely. Well, we've made reference to Veterans Liaison, and Tim
Such
sat
an
here.
important program for us.
Yes, we would love to hear about that.
Well, Casey just touched on something that, you know, I meet with the veterans that are on our services, and after I meet with them, after every single meeting, I always pop them a hand salute, and there has not been one time that they haven't given me a salute back. And you talk about the glint in the eye. They remember and they get it. It's a really special moment. You know, I spent over 30 years in the United States Air Force, and I loved every moment of it. But this job here is the most rewarding job I've ever had, because I get to go out and I get to meet with these men and women that served our country. And make no mistake about it, particularly, you know, our World War II veterans and our Korean War veterans, there's a strong sense of patriotic pride that each and every one of them have. And I'm blessed to be able to hear their stories, you know, and really connect with them. You know, some of these folks, you know, some of them were in combat. Let's put it bluntly. They were in combat 50, 60 years ago, and you know, they suffer from PTSD, or back then it was shell shock or battle fatigue, and they've carried that burden with them all their lives. For whatever reason, they didn't have the same resources that today's veterans have, where it's mandatory to speak to someone. So they came home from war, and they held what they saw and what they did for 50, 60 years, you know, and it's a heavy burden.
Absolutely.
So when they're at the end of their life, when they're going through their life review, I'm the guy quite often that they unloaded on, and it's an honor for me to be able to do that, and I believe it gives them some comfort, you know, as they're going through their journey and you know, getting ready to pass. So I got to be honest with you, I'm a very lucky man to be able to go out there and talk to these men and women, you know. I've spoken to a lot of World War II veterans, a lot of Korean War veterans, and now a lot of Vietnam veterans. You know, they're getting to be that age, you know. So it's
that's an incredible role, though, to have someone in that position to be able to. Is that something that's new with hospice
There
care,
are no words for this. I think
Yeah.
it's something, we're the only hospice in Massachusetts and most of across the country that actually pay to have staff who are veterans that come in, because we have found that it is so powerful. It is so needed. 1 in 4 deaths in the United States right now is a veteran, that we're losing them that quickly now. And the idea that if we're truly going to try to help find inner peace for somebody, help them, this is something that we need to do. It's not optional for us. You know, I mean, Tim is being very gracious about really the role and the impact he makes on these men and women. We have people at the end of life who are terminally agitated. I mean, what they saw and did in war, he absolutely is correct. It's a burden to them, and when somebody's preparing to die, all they want to know is that they were a good person, that they were relevant, and that I'm not going to go to hell because I killed somebody in combat. And our role, Tim's role really, is to help them understand and to let them know that we know they're a good person, We know that they wouldn't have done this had they not been placed into that situation, and that they, they will be rewarded for whatever that they did, and that we thank them for their service. And it's such a powerful thing. I mean, we have our social workers and chaplains, and I can't emphasize how important it is for this role. Our chaplains and social workers are lovely, but you've got a 70, 80, 90-year-old combat vet is not going to unload on this young, 30, 40-year-old social worker or chaplain and say, yeah, I just want you to know, I saw 3 war buddies, blown up in the trench next to me, and I don't know why I survived, and I don't know, or I had to kill somebody so that they didn't kill us. I mean, can you imagine the burden of 40 or 50, 60 years of that? And so by having our vets, we have 2 full-time vets, they go out and they're able to help them understand that they are a good person, and that part of their end-of-life journey is to absolve them of some of the things that they've carried with them. And I know that Tim is, again, being very gracious with the role he plays, but he's been in situations where we've had terminally agitated patients that are afraid to close their eyes for fear they're going to die before they address this, and getting him in there and saying, just tell him, talk to me, and I mean, I get goosebumps, and I'm not going to, violate anybody's privacy, but, there are times that they're in there and they do release, and they can sleep for the first time in a week, and then after they kind of absolve some of the other things, they're able to peacefully pass away. It's not a small function that Tim and Tom, our other veteran liaison, provide. And people come to the end of life journey with a lot of stuff.
We all have burdens.
We all have stuff. Whether we have regrets or whether we wish we had done something differently. Hospice, a lot of people think it's about the clinical side, and there is an important role, but our hospice has really decided to take on more what we consider a holistic approach, which means we're really, really going to get in and help these patients and families with the psychosocial, spiritual, because that's what's causing so much pain. You know what? We can get the physical pain taken care of. We can medicate them, we can do whatever, but in one of the cases I'm thinking of that Tim was in there, we couldn't medicate our way out of it. And I finally said, with the chaplain and the social worker, with Tim and the chaplain, I said, get in there. I said, and see what's holding this guy up. And they got in there, and literally, it was what it is, and it's not the only patient. Being able to help that patient find that inner peace to die not only helps the patient, it helps the family members have a much better bereavement outcome because they have no regrets. We've sort of taken the coulda, shoulda, wouldas off the table. It's just something that we have actively advocated for in 10 years that we started Compassionate Care Hospice in New England, that this was the model because there were so many other models that were more about the medical side and felt that, yes, that's important, but at this stage of someone's illness, many times it's to maybe help fractured families, it's to help patients who have regrets, to help lift that burden for them. And I have to tell you, I'm so proud of this program, and we've expanded to 3 other programs in New England, and there's not, the only time we get a complaint from a family most of the time is, I wish we had done this sooner. And that's a really important message to families. Don't, even if you think it's too soon, reach out and let us help you. And if it's too soon, we'll tell you that. Right. But at least you're on our radar, and when we are ready, we can get in there. And it is such a powerful thing to help families at this stage of their illness. And I know I go on, but there's 3 things that a patient who is terminally ill has said to us. There's 3 things, and we want families to know. Number 1, I beg you, don't let me be in pain. I don't want to be in pain. Number 2, I don't want to be a burden to my family. And number 3, I want to make sure that my family's going to be okay after I pass. So if you think about, hospice addresses those 3 very specific wishes of a dying patient. Our job is to keep them physically, spiritually, and psychologically free of pain. We will be there helping the family take care of this person so that the patient doesn't feel like they're a burden to anybody. And number 3, through our bereavement program up to 13 months, the patient understands that we're going to be with them the journey continues for their loved ones in hospice for as long as they want it, up to 13 months. So there's a very powerful things when someone is going into the end-of-life journey. And I think the thing that's really important is people think, oh, well, they have dementia, they really don't know. They absolutely do know. And, you know, they may have dementia, they may not remember what they had for breakfast that morning, but they sure as heck remember which warship they served on in which arena and which war buddies didn't come back with them. And it's such a powerful thing. Or they remember, a lot of times, even the adult children of some of our patients don't really know, because parents are very protective of their children. They may not even be aware that there was a young sibling that died that the family never spoke about, and now it's coming out, and or there might be a second child somewhere, or maybe the mother gave up a child for adoption when or the father had another child somewhere. This stuff comes up, and many times we're helping the family sort of piece that all together. And it's just amazing. Some people have had some brutal upbringings, and when they're doing life review, it comes back. And our job is to try to really help them through that and support them.
Before we go, do you have any other stories that you want to share of people's experience with hospice?
I'd like to share, one in particular. We do have what's called a hospice foundation, and a lot of our families will donate to this foundation, and we, out on the field, can access it very quickly. So we've had some families that the patient's goal might be to die at home, but we've accessed the foundation to pay their last month mortgage. We've gone into homes that have no air conditioning or fans, so we can immediately access the foundation to bring that to the family. I think one of two of my favorite stories are, I was on call one weekend, had to go up north, and it was a really sad case because this woman had brain cancer, and she was fairly young. She was about in her 70s. And her son was there, and I said, is there anything we can do for her? What does she love? And he said, honestly, she didn't really have a lot of hobbies, but she loved Elvis Presley. So we got in touch with the social worker. They accessed the foundation, were able to get some money released so we could get an impersonator to go out and sing to her. And, that was pretty special.
Right, sure.
And we've done date nights for families. We had a woman that was in a nursing home. She, again, was young. I think she had Parkinson's. I can't remember quite what her diagnosis was. But she fell in love with another gentleman at the nursing home. And we said, well, let's arrange a date night. So they said their favorite food was lobster. So we got lobster rolls. And, we set up a nice little table and candles that were not artificial, not real, of course, had music playing. And they really talked about that. That was something they really looked forward to. And I know this happened real early when I first came to Compassion Care. And I remember Casey sharing the story that one of our patients, she was elderly, and her biggest fear was that her grandson would not be able to say goodbye to her because he couldn't say goodbye to his grandfather. And she said, I just want to be able to say goodbye to him. So we arranged for the Red Cross to go and raise his submarine so that he could make the phone call to his grandmother and say goodbye. Yeah. And she did pass shortly after that. So
we've reached out to the Red Cross multiple times for the military will help, but to get that sub off the bottom of the ocean was
quite a feat.
To be fair, I mean, you know what? Those are the things that are meaningful. And our chaplains and social workers, they have the ability every day to do flowers, or we do a ton of birthdays, we do a ton of anniversary parties. And if you think about it, our job is to enhance their quality of life for whatever time they have left. And so maybe it's a nice birthday party, maybe it's the anniversary, maybe this is going to be the last one. And those are the things that our team looks for. We look for ways to bring people together. And have new memories. When many times people think there's no more memories, particularly if there's a patient with dementia that they don't remember, but they do. When you sort of bring these things together, it's amazing, where we can reach into the recesses of wherever they are and get a glint of some remembrance, which is such a gift to the family. It really is, to know that. I mean, again, I say to families all the time, there's no flowers, there's no boxes of chocolates, there's no sweaters, there's no plants or anything that you can give your loved one at the end of life, but you can give them the gift of dignity and comfort. And hospice is a really good way to provide that last gift to a loved one. And so they feel like, families feel so helpless at the end of life when somebody's dying, but when they are able to embrace the fact that they're doing this for their mom or dad or brother or sister, they feel like they are providing the last gift, which is this is what they want. And you know, people shouldn't be afraid of hospice. I think that H word, you know, it's like, oh, no. I have yet to meet that person that's 150 years old. So regardless of how long they think they're going to live, they're not going to live forever. And so sometimes they just try to hedge their bets a little bit. So I think people, they should learn a little bit more about it, know about it ahead of time so that they're not trying to make decisions in crisis. And I think sometimes that's where people start to get a little bit frenetic and they're like, oh, you know, and we're like, no, if you know that we're here to help you ahead of time, then it doesn't seem so bad, I think.
Exactly. And you can empower people to take
Again,
some
it's
control
about
at the end
control.
of the, right at the end of their life.
It is control.
So could you just let us know how we can get in touch with Compassionate Care? And I think you want to talk a little bit about volunteer opportunities before we wrap up, right?
Sure. So Compassionate Care Hospice, our office that services this southeast area is out of Woburn, Massachusetts. We also have an office in Taunton that kind of does more of the southeast Massachusetts. We have a website, Compassionate Care Hospice, and it's cchnet.net. So it's cchnet.net. Our phone number is 781-935-5550. We also have an office that's in southern New Hampshire, and we're opening an office in southern Maine right now. We also cover the Worcester area. We have a small office in the Metro West area. One of the things that's the most important, we have other team members are volunteers, and so we really reach out to the community. In particular, we're looking for veteran volunteers, folks who might have been a veteran and have some extra time on their hands that might be able to go out and just do friendly visits. And again, they're patients that are in nursing homes, they could be in private homes or assisted livings, to go visit. And we do require, Medicare requires that we do a 12-hour training class, and we could do it in the area. We do it a lot of times at high schools where they come for adult education programs. And we train them how to become a volunteer, and they do notes, and they just go out and they can, it could be an hour a week, or it could be, you know, 2 to 3 hours a week, depending on how many patients. Sometimes if they go into a building, they might see 2 or 3 patients in one building. But it's really a wonderful way to have a friendly visitor, particularly for patients. We do have patients who don't have family members. And so this is a really nice way to provide some extra visitors for them. Or they have family members who are not local. You know, they stay here for whatever reason, but the family members have moved out of state. And so it's another good way to be able to give back to the community, particularly if they have some extra. So volunteers, again, can call Compassionate Care Hospice and ask about it, or they can go online.
Perfect. All right, well, I thank each of you for being
Thank
here.
you.
I think we all learned some valuable information, and it was an honor to speak with all of you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Good to Know, and we hope you'll join us next time. Marcia Lombardo, Outreach Worker from Medway Senior Center. Thank you.